advice, as well as game predictions for the NFL's most exciting games in the 2019 season. But we are doing the top 100 list. We're continuing the top 100 list, Reno, with 60 to 51. We are hitting the midway point in our list.
Yeah, you're talking about the midway point of the list. Big names are starting to come up. We have guys from the AFC and the NFC, both on defense, more offensive guys because that's the top players in the NFL. But this should be a good list, especially coming up 60 to 51, and we got a lot of quarterbacks to talk about in this list too.
Yeah, we're starting off with two quarterbacks, and let's just go ahead and get right into it, Reno. And it starts with Deshaun Watson, the quarterback for the Houston Texans, and he really had a season that took this team pretty far, and they took him to the playoffs, took him to wild card. Disappointing wild card performance, and I feel like that's kind of the way it is for the Texans. Usually, they have a good season and then they go to the wild card, and then they lose. Unlucky for them though, they caught a really hot Colts team. But Deshaun Watson, coming off that ACL injury, really silenced a lot of people who were questioning. One of them being me, questioning whether or not he was going to come back and be the way he was in his freshman outing. He goes for 26 touchdowns, only 9 interceptions, over 4,000 yards with a 68% completion percentage. So Deshaun Watson just really going out there, having a good season for the Texans, and he's proving to be that starting quarterback for the Texans. So I'm really excited to see him down the line.
Yeah, you talked about Lorenzino. I mean, Deshaun Watson, he started off, it was a bad struggle at the beginning of the year. I mean, the Texans didn't really look good. We are like, this injury's it's not going to affect Deshaun Watson. I said that numerous times, like, this injury is not going to affect Deshaun Watson. And sure enough, he had a Pro Bowl year. He did what he needed to do coming in that second year. And he really hit the mark. You talked about he threw for 4,165 yards, 26 touchdowns, and 9 interceptions. To me, that's a win. We saw last year that he could have had the Rookie of the Year lined up for him, and the injury really it hit the Texans really hard. But this year, we really saw what the Texans are made out of because they actually have a quarterback like Deshaun Watson, and that's what they drafted him for. That's why he was a first-round pick. They needed a quarterback of their future, a guy that can be that team leader, a guy that can be that captain, and Deshaun Watson has proven it. He's won a national championship. Now he comes into this Texans team where they've had struggle at quarterback since Matt Schaub when they had that really amazing season. But Deshaun Watson coming into his own, and he's electrifying. Whether you're a fan of his or not, he can run with the football, he can pass the football, got a strong arm, and he makes plays. Him and Cam Newton remind me a lot of each other because they both are great with their legs, and they have, the firepower that they have throwing that ball 50 yards, 60 yards out. It's incredible to look at these two guys. But they're changing the game of football, and that's another reason why Watson's up here high in this list because he's another guy that can change the game. We're seeing these now quarterbacks that can scramble and have that big arm in the NFL, and Deshaun Watson's one of those guys. You see him, Patrick Mahomes, Baker Mayfield. These guys can do it all, and the first person to actually in the NFL to come in here was Cam Newton. He was just a grown man playing college football in Auburn. And same thing when Deshaun Watson was at Clemson, just a grown man playing football. And now in the NFL, it translated very well. So great year for Deshaun Watson. 2018 was great. 2019 could be even better. Hopefully the Texans can actually get the job done in the playoffs. That's where he needs to improve. But other than that, he's a phenomenal quarterback.
Hopefully the Texans can put an offensive line around Deshaun Watson because really the struggles for the Texans offense have been that offensive line and not being able to protect Watson. He's one of the most sacked quarterbacks in the NFL. I believe he was the most sacked quarterback last season. And when you have a talent like Deshaun Watson, as great as he is as a scrambling quarterback, you really want him to gain experience when he's in the pocket. And when the offensive line is allowing the most sacks in the NFL, that's not really happening. That's not working out. They have DeAndre Hopkins, and that Deshaun Watson, DeAndre Hopkins connection is one of the best, if not the best, in the NFL at this point. So if not only they can build that offensive line, but also put some more weapons around him, Will Fuller keeps getting hurt. They don't really have a tight end. If they can go get a tight end, a pass-catching tight end like him, this Texans offense could be even more dangerous than what it is with just those two guys,
Right.
Yeah. So we'll stick in the AFC with the quarterbacks, and we go from Deshaun Watson, who's this very young and vibrant quarterback, and now we go to Phillip Rivers, one of the older quarterbacks in the AFC, and he led the Chargers up to a 12-4 record, led them to the playoffs, got a playoff win in the wild card against Baltimore at Baltimore. Reno, what do you feel about Philip Rivers' performance this past season?
I mean, everybody every year is like, when is Philip Rivers going to join Eli Manning and Ben Roethlisberger for a Super Bowl ring? And it's been the talk since Eli won that second one. And you don't see him because the ownership of the Chargers, the whole thing from San Diego to LA, it's been all over the place. And Phil Rivers just hasn't played well in the last couple of years. He hasn't been. I mean, he makes the top 100 list almost every year, but it's not like in the teens or in the 20s or in the 30s. It's almost like in the 70s, 80s because he hasn't really proved himself. But if this was the year that Phil Rivers needed to make that big step to be that contender of people like, oh, they're really counting on us, for this Chargers team to make a great push. It was this year. This year was his highest completion percentage since 2003 when he had 69.5. He had 68.3. That's a big improvement. His passing yards are a little down from this year to last year. He had 4,308, but he had more touchdowns, and he's improved a lot. He has the targets. He's proven it time and time again. Where you see guys like Keenan Allen, and you had the Williams, but then again, when you have a guy like Philip Rivers who can manage how many injuries they have on offense, that's a pretty dang quarterback. They didn't know who their tight end was. You really think a guy like Antonio Gates, who came out of retirement, is going to be my leading tight end? Like, it's not going to happen. I wanted this young, Hunter Henry kid, and just, he was hurt all year. But the way he is as a leader and how he's very competitive, and it shows on the field because that's exactly how the Chargers play. Very competitive, they're going to play with that swag on both sides of the ball. And that was a big reason why they ended up making the playoffs this season. They had the right pieces and they had the right quarterback to get that, to make that next step. Sure, Kansas City was better than them. I mean, Kansas City was really good this year. But the way Philip Rivers handled every situation that he was in this year with the Chargers, it proves why he's going to be going down as one of the greatest quarterbacks of all time. His stats are there of all time: touchdowns, passing yards, attempts. It doesn't matter. Any quarterback stats in there except for that elusive one, which is the championship ring. But I've seen so many great players like Tony Gonzalez, and Jason Witten, who does not have a ring, but they still pull off Hall of Fame career numbers. And here's another opportunity for another Hall of Famer in Philip Rivers. I hope he does get better next season because, that Chargers team has a lot of potential, Lorenzino, and they can go a far way into the AFC Championship game, maybe in the Super Bowl. But yet again, I feel like Philip Rivers is the main question. Like, do we want to draft a quarterback with this new breed like a Deshaun Watson we just mentioned, or do we want to keep rolling with Philip Rivers? Time will tell. I mean, we're already seeing that. I don't care what anybody says. I think Eli Manning's done in New York. We'll see it in 3 weeks. Bye-bye, Eli. But, I hope this doesn't happen to Philip Rivers because Philip Rivers is a good quarterback. But those quarterbacks they're getting old, and that generation's leaving, and a new generation's coming. So if Philip Rivers can keep up the numbers like he did this year, we can see Philip Rivers in the next 5 years still playing in the NFL. He needs to pay the bills for all those kids that he has anyway. So, I mean, Philip Rivers is going to get the job done. Hopefully it's soon, but he deserves to be on this list.
Oh, most definitely. And for me, one of the favorite games that I saw this season was Thursday Night Football, where the Chargers were on the road in Kansas City, and they win on that, that walk-off touchdown, and then they get the 2-point conversion. It was just such a Philip Rivers game, and he has that potential, and I feel like we don't really see that a lot because he is always regarded as this guy who just hasn't gotten to the Super Bowl yet, and he just really doesn't get a lot of attention, and he's one of the better quarterbacks in the NFL, and despite the age, and he's had a lot of great teammates. He's had LaDainian Tomlinson, he's had Antonio Cromartie, he's had Junior Seau, all those guys. But this team last year was probably the most talented team he's ever had. And a lot of that team is translating into this season. So there were a lot of people saying that the Chargers were their dark horse Super Bowl candidate. And for this next season, I understand that Kansas City's still there in the AFC West. But I think that the Los Angeles Chargers have the potential with that team and with that veteran quarterback in Philip Rivers to be a team that could go to the Super Bowl. They could surprise people. Obviously they had a very poor performance when they went on the road to New England. People were not expecting that,
Right.
but I think they're just going to get better from it. And I think I keep thinking of Nick Foles for whatever reason, but Philip Rivers, I think he's going to be able to lead that team, and I think there's a lot of potential that they could make the Super Bowl. Let's go over to the defensive side of the ball now, Reno, and we're going to the NFC. One of the less talked about pass rushers in the NFL, but he continuously, year in and year out, gets it done, and that's Ryan Kerrigan from the Washington Redskins.
Man, it puts a smile on my face every time I hear about Ryan Kerrigan because very quiet. He always has a quiet season. It doesn't matter where he's at for the Redskins, but he just has that quiet season. And this year he had a great campaign, a Pro Bowl campaign. I mean, man, when you talk about a guy that's consistent, that can play all over the field, it's, even though he's getting older and older as years go on, he still just has that high motor and doesn't give up. And Ryan Kerrigan was that man this year. I mean, Washington didn't really have anything go their way, both offense and defense this year. I mean, come on, we've seen 3 quarterbacks for the Redskins on offense. And for the defense, they go and draft this big guy, Deron Payne, out of Alabama. You think there's going to be some changes up here, but it really didn't happen for the Redskins yet. Another reason why they finished last place. Actually, not last place, but second to last in the division because, the defense just didn't step up. There's a lot of key playmakers on defense. I mean, other than Kerrigan, you got Josh Norman, Clint Dix was back there in the secondary at trade deadline. So you see a lot of guys coming in and out, and there wasn't that one consistent guy other than Kerrigan. But Kerrigan was all over the field this year. I didn't care what anybody thought about it. He was one of the league leaders in sacks. He was one of the league leaders in tackles. I mean, he did everything that the Redskins needed him to do on defense and more. Like I said, they didn't have much. And for some reason, Ryan Kerrigan is just always there for them when they need them. Now, that being said, he is 30 years old, Lawrence, and he's not going to be there much longer. But, I mean, I've seen guys like Terrell Suggs and Calais Campbell get better with age. So maybe he might get better with age here, Ryan Kerrigan, but it's very tough for a linebacker to do that. But Ryan Kerrigan played out of his mind for 2018.
Yeah, and he just another like Philip Rivers. He's just another guy in a team that doesn't get a lot of attention. Maybe Washington gets a little bit more attention than the Chargers, but he's one of those guys who consistently year in year out plays very good, and then he just doesn't get the attention. I mean, look at the past 3 seasons for him: 11 sacks, 13 sacks, and this past season 13 sacks. And then you go with the 18 tackles for loss, the 15 tackles for loss, and the 11 tackles for loss. He is the best player on defense whenever the Redskins take the field, and to have a pass rusher, that's one of the most important positions in the NFL arena. To have a pass rusher like Ryan Kerrigan, they list him as linebacker, but let's be honest, the guy is putting his hand in the dirt and he's rushing the passer.
Right.
19 quarterback hits this past season. He's an animal, and if they can just put some more help there with the Washington Redskins on that defense in front, he could thrive even more than these 13 sacks. And even then, he could even allow these young players to learn and to grow and to get their own numbers because everyone's concentrating on Ryan Kerrigan,
Right, 100%.
So Eddie Jackson, ties the league, or he has the league lead in interceptions this past season with 8. And We've talked a good amount about these Chicago Bear players, but Eddie Jackson was just another one in that secondary who continuously is just game in, game out, making plays for that defense.
Yeah, and you saw it a lot with this Bears secondary last year. I mean, probably the best defense in the NFL, 100%. If you look at every aspect of their team, they were probably the best last year. No questions asked, but the secondary really lit up the scoreboard. And we talk about Adrian Amos a lot, and we talk about, all the other guys, their corners, the Fuller. But Eddie Jackson was probably the guy that did the most, I think, in my opinion. I mean, everybody gives credit to Amos, which everybody should. But, oh, my God, Eddie Jackson, man. That man was a threat. You talk about a guy that led the league in interceptions. And people forget he's 26, and he spent all 4 years in college. Good for him because he it's hard to do that in the NFL, but he did it, and he comes here at the Bears. Bears needed help in secondary, and he's made his mark, and he did it again this year with interceptions, like you mentioned it. But also, when it comes to touchdowns, he's done it too. He had what? How many did he have this year?
Maybe 2 touchdowns.
2 touchdowns. So he gets the job done on both ends of the ball. If you need him to get balls into the end zone, be my guess. But that's always good to have a safety like that, like Eddie Jackson. And for him, the reason why I say Eddie Jackson's probably the most underrated players the Chicago Bears has because no one really talks about him that much. Everybody talks about Khalil Mack and Hicks and the linebackers of Roquan Smith and Fuller, but Eddie Jackson had a quiet 2018, and it was a Pro Bowl 2018. It was a first team 2018. So a guy like that deserves to be in the top 100 no matter what anybody says, because those quiet guys are the most deadliest because they're going to be like, oh, we didn't game plan for this guy. And then all of a sudden you're like, wait, how did you not game plan this guy that leads the league in interceptions? Mm-hmm. But, hopefully he has another 2018 because that Bears team was lightning fast. And, people that had this defense knows how good they were, especially they had them in fantasy football because they would put up, a consistent 13 points, 10 points, which is what you need to your defense to do in fantasy. And Eddie Jackson was a big reason why that happened. And 2018 was just one step forward for him.
Yeah, and I said he had 8 interceptions. It was 6, but that was still the league lead. And I see that he had 15 passes defense, which is an outrageous number for a safety. And to me, that makes me think that a lot of teams were testing him. And I think that this next year, 2019, that number 15 is probably going to be about 3. Because I don't think a lot of teams are going to be testing Eddie Jackson in pass coverage anymore. And, he scores 2 touchdowns on the year, ends with 51 tackles, and 6 interceptions. He is just out there all the time making plays for the Chicago Bears defense. They lost Adrian Amos to the Green Bay Packers, the division rival. Let's hope that they can secure up one of these safeties in Eddie Jackson because he is special for them. And like we said, the guy played 4 years, and he played 4 years at Alabama, so that shows that he was a good player immediately coming from college football. So, Pro Bowler, first team All-Pro, 26 years of age. Eddie Jackson still has a bright career ahead of him. So we'll stick in the NFC. We're going back to the offensive side of the ball now. And Robert Woods, once oh my God, I can't remember his name right now. The receiver for the Rams that went down with the torn ACL. Cooper Kupp. When Cooper Kupp went down, a lot of people thought that the person that was going to save this team was Brandon Cooks. Yep. But really, Robert Woods became that safety blanket for Jared Goff.
Yeah, you talk about I remember that game. Everybody's like, oh my God, Cooper Kupp's injured. You're like, oh no, who's going to save this? Everybody's going to think, okay, this is why they got Brandon Cooks for a reason. This is exactly why they brought him in L.A., from New Orleans and New England. This is why we brought him to save this team. And no, it ended up being Robert Woods. And Robert Woods, he's had a long NFL career. 6 years in the NFL. Spent his first 4 in Buffalo. And he was one of those guys where it's like, oh, Robert Woods. He's almost like what Dante Moncrief is right now. Like, no one wants Dante Moncrief. And it was the same thing with Robert Woods. They're like, again, this guy hasn't produced any numbers. Can only give me like 500 yards every year. This is not the guy I need. But then he joined the Rams prior to last season. And boy, oh boy, he's had a remarkable. In 2017, it wasn't the biggest increase. This is his league. His best year receiving wise, he had 781. But they're like, you know what? We need to get this guy some more targets. Then Cooper Kupp goes down, and boy, oh boy, the floodgates open. He ended up the year with 6 touchdowns, 1,219 yards on 86 receptions. Man, fantasy players loved him. Everybody that went up against this man in fantasy hated him. Because we all know how electrifying that Rams offense is with Todd Gurley. We mentioned Brandon Cooks and Jared Goff. And that one game they played Monday Night Football, that game that was supposed to be played in Mexico, but ended up being played in L.A., which gave the Kansas City Chiefs a home field advantage on the L.A. Rams. They went back and forth, and the one guy that, other than Tyreek Hill, the one guy that really stood out to me in that game was Robert Woods. It doesn't matter if he's running slants or runs a vertical, he curls. It doesn't matter. He can run every route, and he's very quick too. So he can be in one corner, take one step, and he's already in the middle of the field. And that's where he killed a lot of teams this year, inside the middle of the field, which a lot of receivers don't like doing because, you can get hit from your safety, fumble the ball, have a serious injury. But Robert Woods was able to take those risks because he was fast and lengthy, and he made it work for himself. And the the main reason why Robert Woods probably makes this list is how good he made the Rams offense when Cooper Kupp went down. Because Cooper Kupp, he was a game changer, and hopefully he's on the speed recovery for this upcoming season. But everybody was like, we're not going to rely on Brandon Cooks and Tyler Higbee all season. We need someone to step up, and they ran the brakes off Todd Gurley too. But Robert Woods, had himself acquired not a Pro Bowl year, not an All Pro year, but Robert Woods had a good year to make him one of the top 10 receivers of 2018. That's how good he was, and to see that he took that leap of faith, that the Rams took that leap of faith, and Sean McVay's like, we're going to trust in Robert Woods. Kudos to them because it was a great decision. Now, here's the funny part. They have 3 receivers coming back from last year's group. We got Woods, Cooper Kupp, and Brandon Cooks. So here's the question. What do I do now that I have a guy that established himself, a guy that's coming back from injury, and a guy that's been on 2 different teams, but yet we haven't seen him be that electrifying guy that we wanted him to? It's gonna be a lot of egos going around that locker room saying, "I want the ball, I want the ball, I want the ball." I mean, it happened in Pittsburgh, but if I'm the guy, if I'm Sean McVay, I'm giving it to Robert Woods because he was consistent last year. When the Rams needed the most, he capitalized on it, and he's number 1. He's not returning from injury. Number 2, he hasn't been a journeyman in the NFL. So Robert Woods deserves to be on this list. If I'm another team, I'll probably trade for him because I know he's pretty old. He's going to be 27, but heck, I'll take that risk, especially when a guy that's just caught 1,219 yards all of last season for a offense that, let's say, was in the system.
Yeah, and he was like what I said, down the line, he was a consistent target for Jared Goff. He made those plays. I think he even ruined your fantasy. Did he ruin your fantasy season, Reno?
No,
that another game?
That was another game. I mean, no. Who ruined
it was the kicker it was Will Lutz.
Yeah, it was Will Lutz that ended my season really early.
Yeah. So that was Will. It wasn't Robert Woods. It was Will Lutz, but he contributed to it. Robert Woods did contribute. I remember that. But he was a consistent. He was. 86 receptions on 1,000 or $112, and he was just like what you said. He comes into Los Angeles. Cooper Kupp goes down. Everyone thinks it's going to be Brandon Cooks, and it was Robert Woods. Obviously we didn't see a lot of Robert Woods in the Super Bowl, but just that entire offense just kind of went haywire in that Super Bowl for the Rams. But Robert Woods, 6 touchdowns. 179 fantasy points on the year. He was one of the more consistent receivers this season, and the catch rate, he had second highest catch rate in his history. In his career, second most. So he was one of the better wide receivers. Top 10. That's a stretch. I actually have to think about that, but he was definitely one of the best.
I mean, come on, we didn't see Odell, AJ Green hurt. Both Vikings receivers fell off when like mid-season.
Yeah, but Adam Thielen is probably top 5 this past year.
Yeah, 100%. Adam Thielen is, but Diggs. We already had this discussion about Diggs, so we don't have to go back to the discussion. But
Alshon Jeffrey was better than Diggs this past year.
See, there we go again. But I think Robert Woods is better than both of those two this last season, and it proved it this year for the Rams. They went all the way to the Super Bowl. They had to put the backpack on, put the horses on the back of Robert Woods, and it ended up working well.
Yeah. All right, Reno. Well, I'm gonna hand the mic off to you on this one because next on our list at number 55 is David DeCastro.
Woohoo! I love talking about Steelers players. David DeCastro is one of my favorites. Drafting him out of Stanford, the Steelers needed a guard, and they needed a right guard to save their lives because for some reason Ben Roethlisberger always got tackled early on in his career, and they needed somebody other than Marquise Pouncey to help him, and that's when they went out and drafted David Michael DeCastro out of Stanford, and he's proved it every year since he came into the league. Yet again, another Pro Bowl season for David DeCastro. He earned it, but doesn't commit that many penalties at all in his entire career. This last season, he only had 1 holding call, 1 false start, which is 2 penalties this season. And he's very reliable. He played every game the Steelers needed him to. And, you look at the Steelers when Ben Roethlisberger started out his career, Ben had some Hall of Famers. You had Max Starks, and then you progress on, then you got Pouncey, but it was always like protect Ben, protect Ben. We need to protect Ben, and they added DeCastro to the lineup of Pouncey. And if you ask me, those are the best two guys that I want to run behind, Marquise Pouncey and David DeCastro, because for some reason nobody gets those two guys. I mean, you can get them from the left side, but the right side's kind of just sealed up with Pouncey and DeCastro. And David DeCastro, other than probably Zach Martin, Zach Martin's probably another guy that can claim this role, but he's probably the best guard in the NFL. Um, and DeCastro just plays consistently for the Steelers, just consistently. One of those guys that, it doesn't matter how many guys, it doesn't matter if you have Khalil Mack on them or you have J.J. Watt. They won't have that kind of effect on the game because David DeCastro's on that side. And for a guy, you always need people say left tackle is the most important position in the NFL on the offensive line. In my opinion, that is true. But if you're talking about a second position, it's probably right guard. You need a good right guard to just ease off the pain, especially because some of the best pass rushers come on that side of the football. The right guard and the right tackle will get the best pass rushers in the NFL no matter what. And for David DeCastro to go up against some of the best guys at their position on that side of the football, it shows you the numbers speak for itself where it talks about tackles and sacks. He doesn't really allow that much. And he's done it consistently since 2012 when they took him in the first round. And boy, oh boy, he's getting, like I said, he's getting better with age. Came into the league at 22, he's 28. And now you talk about a guy that, he's going into another contract season. And do you want to pay him? If I'm Pittsburgh, I want to, but we've seen with Pittsburgh Steelers not wanting to pay their players, and this can get some wild. But they usually take care of their offensive line. And I don't think Pouncey will go anywhere. Not Pouncey, DeCastro will go anywhere. So I love David DeCastro with all my heart, and I hope he remains a Pittsburgh Steeler.
Yeah, and offensive line. I don't think a lot of people understand the importance of an offensive line. Great, yeah, you have to protect your quarterback, but it's so much more than that. It's calling the mic. It's calling these very important. It's calling coverages. Sometimes the quarterback can't, especially a young quarterback. Now, granted, Ben Roethlisberger is a veteran in the NFL. But being able to call out coverages that maybe he doesn't see, a player that is potentially going to rush, and he's kind of like, he's teasing it. He's teasing the rush. Things like that. Those are the things that you have to be aware of. And David DeCastro is one of the smartest offensive linemen in the NFL, one of the toughest offensive linemen in the NFL to go up against as well. He's just one of the best to do it.
Yeah.
Now let's talk about a rival of the Pittsburgh Steelers, and that's the Cincinnati Bengals, who at 54, we see one of the better young running backs in the NFL, so much so that it might just hit you with how good he is, and that is Joe Mixon.
Ouch. Ha 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 ha. I see what you did there. No, but Joe Mixon, last year, in and out because he was hurt last season in his rookie year. And I remember this in my way in college. He was really good. He had some off-field issues, like get this pun intended. And a lot of people didn't want to take him, but Cincinnati took the risk since they already have Vontaze Burfict, and they took the risk, and lo and behold, they got a running back that they really needed. And for many years, you had Hill in the backfield and Giovanni Bernard, but now that's done, and now it's all Joe Mixon. Joe Mixon's that guy that was really another running back that was pretty quiet, had a really good season last year, went over 1,000 yards rushing with 1,068, and he had 8 touchdowns. Another bright spot for the Bengals, and the Bengals all last season didn't have a bright spot. They started off pretty good. And then all of a sudden, AJ Green goes down, and it fell apart like a rock. And the only guy that was probably, I'm not gonna say stat padding, but the one guy that was always consistent was Joe Mixon. No matter what, people would be like, "Oh, the Bengals are gonna lose this week," but Joe Mixon didn't care. He would still run all over the teams, and it showed how hard he really runs the football. He's one of those people think he's not a power back. He really is a power back, and he can catch in the backfield too. A guy that can make those simple, 1 to 2 yards that we need and just fake him out. He gets the job done. And Joe Mixon, he's going to get better. He's only his second year. He's 22 years old. And, a guy like this who is very young in his career, um, that can go with stats like this, like a Zeke and like a Gurley and all these young guys. They're changing the game, and Joe Mixon's that guy that he's the game changer for the Cincinnati Bengals. I mean, AJ Green's probably gonna be done pretty soon. Uh, they gotta get rid of Andy Dalton for crying out loud. Cincinnati's on the right move since they don't have Marvin Lewis anymore. Thank God. But still, I can't wait to see what they do this year. I want to see how they're gonna actually go in and what they want to do with Joe Mixon, because Joe Mixon can do a lot of things for the team, and they have the I'm not gonna say they have the quarterback, but they have the offensive line to get the job done. So we already saw the flashes of him and his greatness last season. Let's see it again. But he goes on this list because of the way he basically carried a football team all last season, and he did it with his legs.
Yeah, and I had him in fantasy last year, and he was just a consistent 15-point, machine. Over and over. He had 200 fantasy points on the year on almost 1,200 rushing yards, with 8 touchdowns. And like what you said, Andy Dalton went down this past year, and he, Andy Dalton was playing good those first couple weeks of the season. Then AJ Green goes down. That offense becomes a little bit more one-dimensional. They focus more on the run. Thankfully, the emergence of Tyler Boyd. You have AJ Green, and Tyler Boyd is a very good complement to AJ Green. And I think as the years go by with Tyler Boyd, we're going to see him become more of a number one receiver. You got to give him a little bit more time though. But what Joe Mixon did was like what you said. He put the team on his back, and they had their play was really bad, but somehow Joe Mixon was no matter what, because you knew what was coming. You knew that it was going to be Joe Mixon, and continuously the performances from Joe Mixon were always good, no matter what, and even when you knew it was coming. So he's one of the younger running backs in the NFL, but he's also one of the better ones. And everyone talks about Saquon Barkley, those type of guys, and I'm not comparing Joe Mixon to Saquon Barkley because Saquon Barkley is an animal, but Joe Mixon is a very good young player, and I'm glad that the Bengals have somebody like him. And now with a coach in Zach Taylor who is offensive minded, I think that is only going to make his situation in Cincinnati a lot better for Joe Mixon. Right. So back to the offensive line. One of the more important, you said, the right side of the football is one of the more important sides when it comes to the offensive line. And Lane Johnson, there was a period in the year where Philadelphia won the Super Bowl, Lane Johnson didn't play. And because of that, Philly didn't start off as, there were struggles there on the offensive line. He comes back and they make this huge run, And this season, despite Philly not living up to they kind of surpassed expectations, once Carson Wentz went down and Nick Foles came in. But Lane Johnson, once again, in that offensive line, which is a very talented offensive line in Philadelphia, he came in and he stepped up.
Yeah, the best right tackle in the NFL is Lane Johnson. He didn't have the same campaign as 2017. You talked about how he came back off of injury, and then all of a sudden it's like, oh, here comes the Eagles. Here comes the Eagles. They're storming back. And this year it was the same thing. Like, it was the exact same thing. The Eagles shouldn't have been in the playoffs, but they were. They ended up making the playoffs. And then on top of it, they beat probably the best defense. They beat the best defensive team, one of the underdogs in the whole playoffs. It was the Philadelphia Eagles. And Lane Johnson, and give credit to the offensive line for the Eagles because they really helped Nick Foles down the stretch. But Lane Johnson was the man for the Eagles. You talk about a guy that is a game changer. He doesn't get called for holding. He's only been called for holding 11 times in his career. He's played since 2013. How many holding calls he had this year? He had 0. Never, doesn't get false starts, doesn't have any penalties that much, and a guy that's always consistent. I'll give you a good example of Lane Johnson. So I drafted a Mutt championship team, okay? And there's this 92 diamond Lane Johnson. I don't have to worry about my team. You know why? Because Lane Johnson's on my right side. And the boy has quick feet. When it comes to arm strength, he's one of the best in the NFL to do it. We saw it. He held Khalil Mack. Khalil Mack was a no-show in that game, that playoff game. It was a no-show. And because guess who was guarding him? Lane Johnson was on the other side of the ball. And you talk about a guy that can probably edge his name into a Hall of Fame category would probably be Lane Johnson. Um, you look about the other guys on the offensive line. That offensive line for the Eagles is really good, outside of Lane Johnson. Um, but when you look at Johnson, you look at what he does on his side of the ball. I mean, it's very quiet. You don't see that much, pressure for Carson Wentz or Nick Foles, whoever was back there for the Eagles. I don't know. They had too many quarterbacks, but whoever was on the back, in the backfield, they could just run through Lane Johnson's side, and that was another reason why that led them to the Super Bowl. I mean, running backs were really good. They had 3 running backs at one point, just torching every team because they would just run on one side of the football, and they made it work. And it's the same thing this year. I mean, they did have some injuries going down the line, but Lane Johnson was just a big focal point of why the Eagles made the playoffs last season. Now, we're going to be in the 2019 season. I don't know how that's going to transition because, there's MVP is not there anymore. He went to Jacksonville, but hopefully it trends really well for that Eagles offense. But if I had to give a word of advice to the Eagles and their running backs, especially Jordan Howard, run on the right-hand side. Just keep running on the right-hand side because Lane Johnson's right there, and he'll make that hole really open for you.
Yeah, I'm so excited that Jordan Howard is now part of the Philadelphia Eagles because, they needed a running back. The Jai situation, that didn't work out so well. Now Jordan Howard, a very young running back for that team who really just didn't fit into that system in Chicago. Now he comes in, and, Jason Peters signs on for another year. You still have Lane Johnson, Jason Kelce. They have a very solid offensive line, and they're going to be good for a very long time. Or actually not very long time because Jason Peters is on the verge of retirement and Jason Kelce isn't getting any older. But as of right now, that Philadelphia Eagles offensive line is very good, and it's going to continue to help Carson Wentz, who has unfortunately caught the injury bug. It's going to help them down the line on just the way that they play. Right. So Cameron Jordan, of the New Orleans Saints, again, another quiet pass rusher. We hear Khalil Mack, we hear Von Miller, J.J. Watt, all those guys. Cameron Jordan, again, 12 sacks for the 2018 season. He makes a Pro Bowl. A lot of people say that New Orleans Saints defense isn't good. Now, granted, it's not one of the best in the NFL, right, but Cameron Jordan on that defensive line has made it one of the more formidable in the NFL recently.
How is he the most quietest? Have you seen interviews with Cameron Jordan? He is very funny. Cameron Jordan is a really funny guy. But you talked about it. Cameron Jordan always makes plays for the Saints. He had 12 sacks this year. And, that's the most important stat I look at, sacks. But he also had 49 tackles, which is what you want to see out of your defense. You don't want to see your D-line to get 49 tackles, especially not your secondary. That's terrible. But he proved this year why, yet again, no one should sleep on Cameron Jordan. He just makes so many plays for that defense. It's not even funny. I don't know how many times I've seen double coverage and his pass rush is just so good where all of a sudden you see the guys, you see the quarterback saying out of nowhere, we got to block 94. 94 is on our butt. But it doesn't matter where you look at all angles. Cameron Jordan will be there no matter what. And it's funny, too, as well, because for a guy that's 29, he's very fast, too. That's crazy. I mean, Cameron Jordan, I love watching him play. He's one of my favorite players to watch, and it shows why the Saints are always consistently good. Do you know how many games he's played in his career, Lorenzino?
I don't know.
No, he's played every game except for one in his entire career.
That's great.
I need a guy like that on my team. I wish I had a guy on that, and he does it at a consistent level, too, giving me 12, 13 sacks every season. I need a guy like that. Everybody needs a guy like that, but Cameron Jordan, one hell of a guy, great person off the field, but he switches that mode when he gets on the field, and it shows in his stats for 2018 and beyond. Consistency is what Cameron Jordan brings to the table, and that's what the New Orleans Saints would love to have, whether it's on offense and defense, and Cameron Jordan is the captain of that defense for one reason only. He makes plays, and he did in 2018.
Yeah, and that one game that he missed happened to be his rookie season. So since his rookie season in 2011, the guy hasn't missed a game. That's pretty incredible.
There you go.
Yeah, I mean, it's important to have a pass rusher, and especially with the quarterbacks that are in that NFC South. You got Cam Newton, you got Matt Ryan, and then obviously we don't know what's kind of going on in Tampa Bay. It's Jameis as of now, but down the line, you never know what it could be. But those are some quarterbacks that can sling the football, and Cam Newton run the football as well. So it's important to get to the quarterback, especially in that division. And Reno, we're gonna close off here with a player who just came out this past season, and it was his only season in the NFL so far. And in my opinion, he should have been Defensive Rookie of the Year. He doesn't get that honor though, but he played out of his mind. He gets a Pro Bowl. He gets first team All Pro, and that's Derwin James of the Los Angeles Chargers.
What I don't understand, people, and I'm gonna grab this mic. What people don't understand about Derwin James is he fell in the draft. I remember we were doing our mock drafts. We both had him in like the top 10. We were all like, he's pretty good in the top 10. No. Where does he fall? LA. Where's LA? Like 18. Oh, what the hell? Are you kidding me? And then again, people, he's from Florida State. How many times do I have to tell you? Florida State and defensive players match up well. Look at Jalen Ramsey. Look at Telvin Smith. Look at Vince Williams. How many guys do you know from Florida State that has produced in the NFL? It's crazy. I'm just going to take this mic and probably rant. This guy's a stud. I mean, come on. He had 75 solo tackles. He played the crap out of AB when they played each other. That man did not give AB nothing. Nothing. Juju, nothing. He can guard wide receivers. You guy's fast, too. I mean, oh, jeez. Man, I can't even talk about this guy. He's so good. Jeez. He's very lengthy, very strong, but he played all 16 games, 3 interceptions, which you need in a safety. He had 105 combined tackles, 75 of them solo. You don't need that of a safety. Do better. This guy is better, but he's all over the field. So, and then again, I do accept why he has 105 combined tackles. He had 6 quarterback hits. I'm telling you, he's all over the field. But how can you let him drop in the NFL draft? How dumb can you be? That is so dumb. And yeah, you're probably right. He might get, should have been a Rookie of the Year. He should have. I mean, made the Pro Bowl, made the first team All Pro, for crying out loud. I just don't know. Derwin James is going to be the best safety in the NFL in the next couple of years. Everybody's talking about, Earl Thomas went to Baltimore. Yeah, the better safety's in LA. Okay, it's with the Chargers, and Derwin James, for being this young at 22, he's got a long future ahead of him. I take this mic. I'm so mad. You guys are dumb in the NFL. Sonny Weaver's running the dang show out here.
Yeah, I mean, Minkah Fitzpatrick was taken before. I mean, we haven't heard much. We haven't heard much about Minkah Fitzpatrick. I'm not too sure. I'm not too sure about that one, but
I think he was.
Yeah, I mean, he falls and it's this whole thing, And at this point, I mean, the same thing goes for the person who won the Defensive Rookie of the Year, who we're going to talk about, and Leighton Vander Esch, another guy who fell to Dallas. It was those two players, and none of them were taken in the top 10, which is let me see, you have it right here. Los Angeles Chargers picked him at 17. God. Tremaine Edmonds goes in front of him. You get Marcus Davenport. We don't know about Marcus Davenport yet, though. Yeah, Darren Payne, Vita Vea, Minkah Fitzpatrick. The top 10 I'm fine with those guys being taken. Bradley Chubb played great. Roquan Smith's going to be really good down the line. Denzel Ward, we already talked about him on this list.
Oh my God.
Yeah, 17? And then there you see Leighton Vander Esch at 19. We're going to talk about him a little bit down the line. But Derwin James played very good, and he is, he reminds me of Cam Chancellor, and even then I think he's going to be better than Cam Chancellor because I think he has better coverage abilities. He is a Swiss Army knife on defense. You said he covered AB, he covered Juju, he covered those players. You can put that guy in the slot, you can put him on the outside, and where linebacker. They use him at linebacker in that wild card game against the Ravens. They used him at linebacker. He is just always all over the field for that team, and 51. I'm starting to think we should put him a little bit higher, but 51 I think is actually pretty good. He's basically right there at the halfway mark.
Yeah.
But Derwin James.
He'll be in the top 20 next year. I guarantee you.
That's a stretch, but yeah, I mean he could potentially be up there.
We put Earl Thomas in there a couple years ago. I mean.
Yeah, okay. So.
Come on.
But Derwin James ends the list off at 51, one of the young rising talents in the NFL. And next week, Reno, we're gonna we started this week with quarterbacks, back-to-back quarterbacks. the same goes for next week. We'll go with back-to-back quarterbacks. We'll also go with a very good member of the New York Jets' secondary, and as well as the defensive rookie of the year. I am Lorencino Estrada.
I am Rio Del Toro.
And that was Fully Charged. Have a good one, everybody.